Hi, this is Brian Castro from Better Chess Training. And if you're watching this in early 2021, Happy New Year. My first video of the new year. And it's been a little while, so I'm going to try to shake some of the rust off here with a little game analysis. This is a game I played against someone rated 1990 classical on Lee Chess. And I was playing the white pieces. I've been working with a lot of student groups over the last couple months, so I think I'll gear some of my commentary towards their level, but some interesting analysis as well. In any case, I started out with e4. My opponent played c6, d4, d5. So this is the Caro Kann. And the idea, as opposed to some of the other openings, or similar to openings like the French, is to create this solid center and attack the e4 pawn that way. There's several ways to play against this. You can play the advanced, which is actually very popular. It's also very sharp, meaning that there's a lot of tactics involved if you're going to play this, and some exciting games as well. You can play knight to c3. This is probably the second most popular choice. And after d takes e4, knight takes e4. White has a little bit of an edge because of this space, but definitely not a bad game for black necessarily either. And the third most popular choice is the exchange, which is what I played here. Now, there's a couple ways to play against this. C takes d5 is invariably the best choice for black, just maintaining this center. And this is part of black's idea, is that black maintains two central pawns, while white only has one pawn here in these central files. Again, it's not a huge thing, but that's the idea, as opposed to, let me go back here real quick, as opposed to the French defense with the pawn on e6 here. After the exchange, the pawn structure is symmetrical. But in any case, go back here to the game. C takes d5, bishop to d3. The other way to play this, and maybe the more aggressive way, I guess you could say, is c4, the Panov-Botvinnik attack. A lot of my friends play this, and definitely a nice game as well. I also play it on occasion, but been learning the exchange here, the exchange with bishop to d3. So this bishop is on this nice diagonal, and we'll see that a little later during the game. Okay, a lot of ways to play here again. So just a little note here on the openings. Don't worry too much on the specific theory. I know I'm sharing some of the lines with you, but I'm also going to try to focus on the logic behind the moves. Okay. Knight to f6, and here I just play c3, just protecting the d4 pawn. e6 is played, and now actually this is maybe not the best move to play here, because we're going to see in the game here that this bishop here on c8 is shut out for the rest of the game. And so if I look at the opening explorer, knight to c6 is the most popular move, and then after bishop to c4, bishop to g4, getting this bishop out here before e6 is played. And so you want to think about that when you're making your opening moves. You don't want to, you have to think about the development of each of your pieces. And there are some openings where you're going to have pieces that are not optimally placed naturally because of the opening. But that's sort of the idea behind the opening, is to try to find an efficient and effective way to develop these minor pieces, the knights and the bishops. Okay, let's go back here. So with e6 here, a couple moves can be played. It's a fairly rare opening because, like I said, there are it already has this disadvantage here. Knight to f3 could be played, but I played bishop to f4 here. Bishop to d6 is played, and so I just took it. So queen takes d6, and now knight to f3. And so we can see here on development, both sides fairly equal, but you can see my bishop now has some very nice um, diagonals, where black, as we'll see in the game, is going to find it difficult to develop or at least try to make this bishop effective at all. Okay, knight b to d7, and here I just castled. Okay, b6, and here a lot of times in these types of openings, when this is being played, um, this knight is still on b8 to protect here, and then black can try to trade off this bishop. Let's just go back and see how that might look. Let's say he played b6 first, and then I castled, and now he can play this, and now my bishop is pinned, and so he effectively is able to get rid of his worst piece and arguably get rid of my best piece as well. So that would have been an effective strategy. On a side note, had he done that, if he played b6 first, there's a lot of things I could have done differently. I could have either I could have played something like queen to e2, focusing on that, or knight to b to d2, which maybe that wouldn't be as good because after bishop to a6, if I wanted to avoid that trade, now I have some difficulty here castling. But maybe this is something I would have wanted to play if I would have planned on castling queenside. So in this position, after b6, probably queen to e2 would be probably the best, in my opinion. Okay, so knight b to d7 was played in the game. Castles b6, rook to e1, castles knight b to d2, and bishop to b7. Now, in this position, I had a few thoughts. I wanted to I ended up playing knight to e5, which I think was best. But at some point, I'm also thinking of playing g4 and g5. So that's always something that I'm looking for now in this position. The normal plan for black here is what this idea that they call the minority attack, but that's often done after without this bishop here. So you can see already that this development of the bishop is not helping black's ability to have any counterplay. Without this plan of what they call the minority attack on the queen side, then white needs to rely on kingside play, and at some point wants to play e5. However, you can see here I've got he's got a knight and a queen supporting this, and I've got these defenders, but more importantly, it's my move, and so knight to e5 stops that plan altogether. So, and you can see he can't take here with the knight because of this fork would be very inconvenient. So already I'm liking my position quite a bit. Okay, knight to e5, and here this is one of those games where my opponent doesn't really seek out counterplay too actively, and it allows me to build up a very nice position. I do make a very critical mistake in a little bit, which I'll show you, but watch how this position gets built up. And this is why you want to study the games of the Masters, is because these moves, it's not like I obviously calculated, but these moves come from developing these patterns of attack by both playing and gaining experience as well as studying master games. Okay, rook to e8. And it seems sort of an odd move. What I think what he wants to do is support this eventual e5 push, but he's really never going to get the chance here. What could he have done differently? It's very difficult to say. Maybe he might have. What I thought he would do is maybe play something like queen to c7 so that he can take here and exchange off this bad piece. But let's say after queen to e2, and then he exchanges, it's still not great because now this knight is not in a very good position. Now, he could sacrifice a pawn to get a little bit of activity here. So knight takes e4, d takes e4, bishop takes e4, bishop takes e4, queen takes e4, wins a pawn, but at the very least now white or black has some counterplay and some chances here. And with all these trades off, he has gotten rid of his bad pieces, all for the cost of a pawn. So he could have tried something like that, but or in this variation. But going back to the game, rook f to e8 doesn't really have that much of a positive effect, I guess, or a purpose in this position. So you want to make sure all your moves have a good reason based on the position at the board. Okay, rook to e3. The idea here is to be able to swing this rook over to attack. Now you'll notice that the black has all of the weaknesses. Okay, there's really no issues on my side of the board. Right now he cannot take on e5. My king side is safe, and you'll see that later, that I'm able to, because of that, I'm able to attack. And you can see all of his pieces are in much worse position than mine. Okay, knight to f8. So here I thought maybe he was going to try to defend here on the king side, which is I think a good idea. One thing that he has to keep an eye on here is this f7 square. And so he's going to defend it later. And you're going to see just how awkward his pieces look here. So I bring my knight over, and he plays rook to e7. Now seeing that there's a little bit of danger here. And here is where I make I probably give away my advantage. And it's by playing g4. And the idea here is to push g5, of course, maybe with h4 and h5 as well. Kind of a slow buildup of an attack. But the problem here is that it's allowing knight to e4. And during the game, I think I hallucinated because I thought that maybe during the game I would just take, and then after he takes, be able to play something like knight to g4. But the problem here is that it gets hit by this fork. And then if I play something like knight to a4, then something like g5 even just makes my pieces very ineffective. I have to drop the knight back. Now it's got no squares. So knight to e4 would have been very annoying for me, and perhaps would have equalized the game. Probably shouldn't have taken on wouldn't have taken on e4. Again, not quite sure what I would have done during the game, but I think I might have been. I did see this, but I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Maybe I could play something like h4. So I was fortunate there that my opponent didn't play that move. Instead, played it back to d7. And so this makes things even worse. Again, I'm not worried about him exchanging now because I can just replace it with my knight. Here I play g5, and the idea here is to hinder this move, f6. Although maybe it's not a terrible move here because black has to get some type of counterplay. Instead, my opponent exchanges, and then I exchange again. And then I thought again here he would maybe play something like knight to g6. And actually, that is what he played, but either knight to g6 or knight to d7. Let's look at knight to d7 real quick. And here, the problem again is that black has too many weaknesses, and this is an opportunity here. Bishop takes, and let's say he takes. Then we've got rook to h3 check, king to g8, and now queen to h5 with a checkmate that is unstoppable because I'm covering all of these squares. For example, g6, queen to h8 is mate. f5, again, queen to h8 is mate. Okay. But instead, my opponent played the other move here, knight to g6, and very similar attacking style, queen to h5, and now the threat is rook to h3. And here, again, I'm not quite sure what my opponent was thinking. We had a ton of time on the clock. This game was a 45 minutes with a 45-second increment. And my opponent, probably used about 10 minutes of his 45 minutes, whereas I used about 25 or 30 minutes of my time. So when you have these longer time controls, you really want to use that time to think through your moves. Okay. So here he plays rook to f8. And again, now I'm wondering, is he just trying to push f8 here? I think maybe he was not happy about his position. But rook to h3, and it's pretty much all over here, but I'll show you the finish. h6, and here there's a lot of ways to win, but I chose maybe the simplest. Knight takes g6, f takes g6, queen takes g6. Of course, I'm threatening mate in 2 here. Let me just give you an example. If he plays here, then queen to h7 check, king to f7, and bishop to g6 would have been mate. But after queen takes g6, here my opponent resigned. Again, just too many ways to lose here. For example, h takes g5. What would you play here? Here you can sacrifice the rook to deflect the king to h8, and then you can checkmate here. So that was my first game of 2021, and it's a good start, and I hope you enjoyed this video.